Welcome on in another day, another show here at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirits. I am Aniello Piro, joined by my guy, Cody Roark, as we are broadcasting on, what is this, the 8th day of Denver Broncos training camp? The 9th day?
Day 8, yeah.
Not 1, not 2, not
Day
3,
8.
not 4, not 5. Day 8, baby.
Day 8, we're here, body powered by Fairlife. Let's go.
You can tell this fool's exhausted. What was the energy? Hey, day 8, we're here, yay.
Oh,
This
brother.
isn't the Russell Wilson era anymore, bro.
Well, I'm in the middle of moving right now, so I'm tired. I was moving boxes. My whole car right now is packed with nothing but boxes.
That is not fun. But, hey, Fairlife, if you're listening, let's get this sponsorship going, guys.
Yeah,
but
come on now.
So here we are on Thursday, getting closer and closer to the weekend. I think so far this week, Cody, we've seen Bo Nix, I think, steadily progress.
Yep.
We've seen Audric Estime really step up in the running back room. I could see Cortland Sutton warming up over here on the sideline. I've been very impressed by his physicality.
Yeah.
It felt like the defense started out very strong, and they've been fantastic so far as the defense. But as this week has progressed, I feel like the offense is definitely starting to hit their stride a little bit.
Yeah, they're getting more confidence. And look, I think the more reps you get, as Sean Payton said the other day, repetition is the mother of learning. And I think the one thing we've seen from the offense, I think in particular yesterday with Bo Nix, is Bo ran with the first-team offense, and he had this one throw. It was on an in-breaking route to Josh Reynolds, about 15 yards depth downfield, and from that point, it's like, boom, all right, he's in rhythm. Like, the thing with Bo that I've really admired is that, he's quick with the ball. He gets rid of it, and, he doesn't hold on to it. He doesn't sit and scan forever like some quarterbacks around the league do. It's, hey, I'm getting the snap. Really, when he's going, if he's under center, if he's in a shotgun, like, he never gives away where he's going, but he's like, all right, hey, I'm looking at this safety here. Okay, is he closing down? Is he, back in the field? Is it too high? Is it one high? What coverage are they in based on the alignment of the cornerback? Is the cornerback outside or is he inside leverage? Like those things, he does it quickly, and he diagnoses, okay, he knows what the coverage is on one side, and he knows exactly where he's going to go. But he does see, and you've seen this consistently at Oregon, he goes from his first read to his second read to a third read, and if the third read's not there, he knows where the fourth read is, which is usually a check down to a running back or a sit by a tight end there. Just a really good day for Bo, obviously, at Broncos camp yesterday. And really today, no pads. It's shells, so it's helmet, it's shoulder pads, and it's shorts. It's not going to be as physical as it has been. This is all part of building that callousness, right? You want to be smart with it. 3 straight days of pads and thumping and hitting, and then it's like, all right, hey, we're going to go shells, but we're not going to be as physical today just because you need to be smart with the wear and tear. Plus, the CBA is obviously very, very strict. So, I imagine today's practice is probably going to be a lot lighter.
Yeah, which I think is fair. You talk about the 3 consecutive days in pads there. We're still a ways away from the regular season, so you don't want to load these guys up too much. I do want to pick your brain. I know the quarterback conversation is obviously dominating right now, but it was something that I was talking about with Drotar. And I like how you kind of broke down Bo Nix with kind of the progressions and the professionalism and whatnot. But, what is the difference in ceiling with a guy like Bo Nix, who still obviously I think we all think is pretty far away from that ceiling, and a guy like Jarrett Stidham, who I think is a little bit more of a known commodity? Because I'm curious as to how Sean Payton is going to handle this situation as we get closer and closer to the regular season, because you would think Bo Nix would be the best version of himself, not this year, but a couple of seasons down the line. So how do you think Sean Payton is handling the progression and the development of Bo Nix while he knows he kind of has this known commodity in Jarrett Stidham?
Yeah, well, even this, and no disrespect to Stidham, but I wouldn't even say Stidham is a known commodity at this point. Stidham is still developing in his career. He's been in the league this is his 5th season, but he's even still developing himself. He's only got 4 career starts, and he's been in some good quarterback rooms, but he hasn't played a ton in the NFL. But he's got some tools. I think the thing with Jarrett that Jarrett does well, maybe I want to see a little bit more from him in terms of aggressiveness, throwing the ball downfield. But Jarrett's a guy who's going to hit the short to intermediate stuff. He's going to hit the crossing patterns. Bo, I think one thing I've seen, and we saw it yesterday, Bo's going to not afraid to take shots downfield, which is nice, but he can also hit the short to intermediate. He can also hit the crossing patterns in the middle of the field. He did that several times. And I think that, you hear so much talk about, arm strength. People who say Bo doesn't have good arm strength, they don't know what they're talking about. Bo.
Yeah, it's been on display.
Bo literally, the one thing I'll say this too, especially on his throws to the outside, right? You talk about in today's NFL, there's what we call the NFL out, right? It's not the 5-yard out route. It's the out route from 10 to 12. But it's also all right, hey, you have a corner who's really right there. So where do you put the football? You put it high, and you put it outside as far as possible. And Bo can do that consistently. And I think that's going to be a very, very big asset to the Broncos offense this upcoming season with Bo in terms of what he does from the quarterback standpoint. But, for Stidham, I would like to see a little bit more aggressiveness in terms of downfield shots. Now, look, you want to be smart. I'm not telling him to be reckless. But I think Jarrett's a guy who does sometimes play it safe.
Yeah, Jarrett Stidham reminds me a little bit of like Jimmy Garoppolo, where, they're going to make the simple pass. They're not going to do too much. They're maybe not going to lose you games, but, they're not going to be able to do a ton to win you games. They're just a little vanilla. There's nothing wrong with Jarrett Stidham's game. It's just kind of bland.
And he got sacked, I think it was 6 or 7 times in 2 games last year in those final 2 games. And look, that's not his fault. Like, I'd say the Broncos' passing offense improved in terms of, the shorter intermediate stuff. Like, you can now throw across the middle of the field. Like, Denver did that in those 2 games against the Chargers and the Raiders. But it wasn't good enough. And granted, like, Jarrett didn't have a lot of time in those 2 weeks. He was forced to step into the thing. So, as much as, it gets made of that, I think that you are going to see, especially as next week comes up with preseason preparation, their first games not this Sunday, but next Sunday, 11 o'clock a.m. Mountain Time kickoff. That right there is going to be a big test because it's a road game. We're going to see Bo Nix. We're going to see Jarrett Stidham. Shawn Payton told us yesterday the starters are going to play. It almost seemed like a little bit of a shot at Nathaniel Hackett because he said 2 years ago, he said we were dead last in terms of amount of games lost and injuries and things like that. Guys didn't play in the preseason.
Right.
He said we played our guys in the preseason last year and we went from last to first in terms of games lost and obviously injuries around the National Football League in terms of the impact. So, I just think the approach is different. And look, I think somebody asked me today on Twitter, they asked me what my overall vibe was on just seeing the team. And I would say that there's this youthful energy. Like, there's a lot of young players. We mentioned it. There's 8 players on this roster between the ages of 30 to 32, not as much as there were really last year. And then you also have, I think it's 48 players between the ages of 29 to 25, 31 players between the ages of 24 to 20. You know who the youngest player on this roster is? Audric Estime, 20 years old.
And he looks like a tank.
He is a tank. Oh, man, he's a piss missile.
Yeah,
I tell you.
I love it. All right, let's talk about something maybe not so fun. We know that the Broncos have really made a concerted effort to build up their offensive line throughout the course of Shawn Payton's tenure, and in particular this offseason. Unfortunately, yesterday, offensive lineman Quinn Bailey, not related to super producer Danny Bailey, but kind of looks like the Nordic version of him a little bit.
Yeah,
he goes down with a nasty injury.
I saw it and I heard it. I heard it happen. Like, you heard the snap.
Ugh.
And I also
how far away would you say you were? Like, how many yards from where?
I would say so. I was on top of we were in the media tent on top of the hill, and it happened probably at the nearest field to the berm, in the middle of the field right there. So I'd probably say a good 25 yards, 30.
Yeah, it's not like you and I next to each other, right?
No, but you're watching it and it's like you think for a second. It's like, oh, was that the sound of pads? No, it was the sound of his legs snapping. It was horrible. I mean, I've seen too many injuries like that, unfortunately, in the times that I've been alive, watching or either coaching football. And once that happened, immediately you heard it. Players saw it. Players immediately turned their head away from it, and they were signaling for the trainer. But I got to give a props to the Broncos medical staff, the training staff. They did a really good job because within 1 to 2 minutes, they got to Quinn. The cart was out here. They got his leg mobilized in an air cast really quickly. They got him to the ambulance, and the ambulance took him out. And obviously he was placed on season-ending IR. But Shawn Payton said it yesterday, he was expected to be their 6th offensive lineman in the jumbo package. Like, last year was a run, every time we'd hear number 75 reporting as eligible was Quinn Bailey. So now somebody else has to step up in that position. I think maybe I'll give a couple of names that Broncos country maybe needs to pay attention to for that. Alex Paucheski, offensive tackle, undrafted guy who was on the 53 last year. He could be that guy. Or, depending on who wins the center battle between Luke Wattenberg and Alex Forsythe, will probably get that. But I could see that being, if Forsythe wins the job, I could easily see Luke Wattenberg playing that role that Quinn Bailey was. So
interesting.
I will say that. Just a big blow. Obviously, Quinn's been on this team since 2019, is well regarded by his teammates. Just a guy who works his tail off, and just unfortunate to see something like happen. But it's a stark reminder of this is football, and unfortunately, like, there is always a risk of that.
Yep.
But I think the Broncos medical staff, the training staff, did a great job of handling that.
Well, and I take a page out of a friend of the station, Chris Brewer's book, who's a fan or a friend of Dr. Rick Perea. You can catch his show Wellness Wednesday. And Chris, is one of the all-time great high school players to come out of Colorado. And something I was, looking at his clips and watching the episode that he brings up is football is not a contact sport. It is a collision sport.
Yes.
You're going head on. And obviously, our thoughts, prayers, well wishes with Quinn Bailey. You mentioned it, a guy who's been with this organization for quite some time and plays a very vital role. So we will have to see. You gave us a couple of guys that we can keep an eye on in regards to trying to replace his production in that jumbo package and being that sixth offensive lineman. Before we get out of here, we talked about the offense, we talked about the defense, talked about Audric Estime. What are your keys for the rest of this week? What is Cody Roark keeping his eye on?
Well, you want to continue to see guys make it out healthy. I think for the most part, to start training camp since last week and this week, really outside of Quinn Bailey, Denver's come out of each practice healthy. This is
health is wealth.
They're building up mental toughness. You're out here in the heat, you're practicing, you throw on the pads, it's physical, like your body's hurting. Thankfully for the cold tubs, man, that was my favorite part as a player, by the way.
Cold tubs.
So we used to have daily doubles. We'd just go sit in the cold tub after the first practice, go sit in the one after the second practice. Oh, that is great for the body. But I will say this, just want to see the offense continue to progress in the manner in which they have. I think we're starting to get a little bit more clarity. Shawn tried to, I think, confuse us a little bit yesterday because Zach Wilson got reps with the twos. But I think it's really between Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham at this point, and that's nothing against Zach Wilson. Zach's going to play probably quite a bit in the preseason. I think he'll end up more than likely on Denver's practice squad this year, contrary to the knucklehead that was in the YouTube comments the other day saying he knows more than us. You don't know anything. You don't even know where your head's attached there, buddy. But, aside from that.
Don't tell that to Mark Knutson, because Knutson loves him some Zach Wilson.
Well,
3 strikes, milehighsports.com.
I was going to say, there's got to be a sense of understanding of, okay, be out here, observe and see what's going on. I think there's a lot of things going on in the media world where people like the aggregating accounts these days.
Oh,
they see one. Yeah, we don't do that. But you see clips out here. It's like people who aren't here saying things like, you got people calling certain players bust that literally don't come out here and watch practice. It pisses me off because it spreads like wildfire versus like, hey, we actually keep you up to date. You want to know what's going on at practice every day? I write a notebook at milehighsports.com, and then every morning before the next practice, I write a primer. Shameless plug. Go check it out.
Yeah, check it out. He is Cody Roark. Be sure to follow him on social media at Cody Roark NFL and check out all of his work online at milehighsports.com. Also give us a follow on the social channels as well. If you want some additional content from Broncos training camp, we got you covered as well with the Nuggets, the Avalanche, the Rockies, the Buffs. Check us out. Mile High Sports, your team every day. All right, Cody, get back to work, my friend. Thank you so much for a few minutes, and we'll keep the party going right here at Broncos training camp.
Bang, bang.
Yep. Welcome back to the show on Mile High Sports. I'm Shawn and Aniello Piro here. Cody Roark back in action doing his thing over at Broncos camp here today, Broncos Park, out in Dove Valley for training camp in week 2. Aniello, one of the things that is fascinating about this, obviously the quarterback discussion dominates for obvious reasons. It's the most important position in team sports, in American team sports. And without it, your football team is going nowhere. So I understand the attention to detail here. But sometimes the attention to detail during training camp can be overblown because obviously we're looking at this. This is obviously a practice. It's a practice for the public. The fans are here. They do want to put on a show. They want it to be a little more football-centric, seeing a little more plays and a little more action like you would see in a game to put on the show for the fans. But in the end, it is a practice. And one of the things that happens this time of year is people get breathless about a throw to a receiver when that receiver's uncovered, or 7-on-7, or people just barely wearing pads and not really doing a lot of hitting. The quarterbacks obviously can't get hit. So there's a temptation to look at it and say, this means that in the short term. But in reality, it's important to zoom out and realize this is still one of many practices. And when it comes to the quarterback position or any of the others, it's important not to overvalue any particular thing that happens, any particular play, any particular player on this practice field.
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's exactly what it is. It is training camp, training, right? Like, this is the ramp up period. Like, none of this is gospel, right? And I think the way that I look at it is, what they've called the first 2 days of camp, the acclimation period.
Right.
really the body of work in training camp is an acclimation period. I know you and I were kind of just chatting about the Buffs up there in Boulder and, how they're trying some new stuff out and just kind of,
60 plus new players.
Yeah, knocking the rust off. And obviously that's a big difference with the Buffs and the Broncos and whatnot. But I think you do have to take everything here with a grain of salt. Now, I do think that there's some positivity that you can, pencil into your notebook. Like I think Audric Estime has really turned in some great performances. You want to keep an eye on that. Tim Patrick looks good and healthy. You want to keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on for sure. So like I think you can build an outline of what your takes are going to be throughout the course of training camp. But in regards to like finite decision making, I don't think that this is the place to do that, specifically as it pertains to, some of these core guys. Training camp is really an opportunity to find out who's in and who's out on the fringe and kind of build forward from there. So I'm a big take it with a grain of salt guy. We'll see. I think there's been some good stuff here, but I can't dwell too much over the bad either.
Well, and the thing to keep in mind, too, is the bad, right? It depends on what the bad is. Is the bad one of the quarterbacks absolutely missing someone who was wide open and uncovered? Okay, that's bad. But is the bad because, let's say, a Levi Wallace jumps a route and picks one of the passes off from any of the quarterbacks? How bad is that really? Because it is your own defense that's performing as well. So these kind of things, it's very different than when you're going to scrimmage against the Packers later in training camp as it comes to an end, because it is also your own team. So if the pass rush is doing a good job getting to the quarterback, it doesn't necessarily mean the offensive line is terrible. It might mean your pass rush is pretty good. All of these things happen simultaneously, and it's important to look at it, especially when evaluating the quarterbacks. You have Pat Surtain on this field. And in Surtain's case, you're talking about one of the best backs in the league, and he's going to make life difficult for whoever. It's Stidham, Wilson, or Nix. So that's not a bad thing either. And when evaluating the quarterback stuff, when you're out here for a day, when you're out here for a series, when you're out here for a play, that's where you look at it. Have to understand that this is not necessarily a game-changing thing. The coaches don't always look at every interception or every incompletion as all the same things. And when people are out here, whether it's media or fans, and they're charting and saying that Bo Nix went 5 for 8 during this sequence, that's really not the way the coaches look at it. They're looking at an entire body of work. They're looking at each individual play and saying, well, one of those incompletes was because the blitz worked very well and we didn't pick it up offensively. It's not really on the quarterback. So it's too simplistic to look at this quarterback competition and say, oh, Stidham had a touchdown pass to somebody and Nix didn't. Stidham's obviously in the lead. It is not like that, and it's never been like that.
I would also say, not to call anybody out, I just think that's an uneducated way to go about it. It's a lazy way to go about it. It's a
short-term way of trying to let's face it, farm for clicks and attention and act as if something is more important than it really is. Are these practices important? They are. But very rarely, if ever, does any player make or miss a team because of a single play they made during an entire training camp. It just doesn't work that way. It's the entire body of work, and that's where you have to look at this competition.
Yeah, no, exactly.
At every position.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, some positions are the competition's a little bit more fierce than others. Injuries pop up. You had Quinn Bailey getting hurt yesterday, unfortunately. So, we had Cody on to start the show, and he was talking about like whoever doesn't win the starting center position. So if Luke Wattenberg doesn't win it, he probably slides over to become that 6th offensive lineman in the jumbo package. So there's just a number of different ways that you can kind of evaluate it. And, I think Sean Payton, I know, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but I do think he's pretty meticulous in how he goes about his evaluation process. And I don't think he's living and dying by each play, each day here at Broncos training camp. He's looking for the body of work. And, we'll have to see how they continue to progress here. But I do think you make a good point that training camp, you can't take it all at face value. You have to understand that, even the players are probably trying some different stuff out.
Sure.
Right? This is the time to make mistakes.
Right. You're trying new things. Coaches are trying new things. There is the expectation that some things won't go right when you're trying something new. Think about any time you were putting in, let's say, a new play into the playbook. Do you expect it to be perfect on day one? Of course you don't. It takes reps to get right. The other part of this equation is, yes, of course, wins and losses. When the regular season starts, they happen on the football field on game day. But at this stage, a lot of what happens, the players are out here for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Then they're going in and they're working out, and then they're in meetings. They're in meetings with their units. They're in meetings with the coaching staff. They're in overall meetings. They're in film sessions. All of those interactions with your coaches that put your work ethic on display, that have the opportunity to showcase how quickly you've picked up a playbook or how quickly you've learned from mistakes. These are all also factors, big factors in the decision-making, and it's not something you can see out here on the field.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the other part of why I'm actually excited to get to these preseason games because, okay, I know the Bronco fan doesn't want to hear this, right? For the Kansas City Chiefs, the preseason means absolutely nothing, right?
They're just trying to avoid injury.
Exactly. You know exactly what you have. You know exactly what your ceiling is with this team versus the Denver Broncos. I think the preseason is invaluable, specifically with this quarterback competition. You know, Cody had mentioned that to open up the show, how you're going to get a good extended look at Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham, and Sean Payton even came out and said that, I believe, after yesterday's practice of we're going to use those preseason games to get a feel of what these guys look like at game speed. Because I can't tell you, I think this is my 5th or 6th Broncos training camp. I can't tell you how many times a guy will win the day or win the week, you know, during training camp, and then you get to the preseason and it's the exact opposite.
That's an interesting point because I'll tell you what, the one thing of the Nathaniel Hackett regime that I think you can take away and say, like, he did a good job with that. When he called these jog throughs in many cases, because, you know, we hear the term walk through, obviously it's a little more than that, but not even these practices are always running at game speed. You know, there's no game clock going. There's none of that at this stage right now. It's lining up offense, lining up defense, letting them play, you know, 1s and 2s and all that. But also you mix and match for those points. Because you brought it up here. This is where you try stuff out. This is where it's okay to fail because that's how you start building towards being better as the season rolls along. But when you look at some of these competitions out here, and the quarterback competition looms over everything, but you brought up the injury to Quinn Bailey. That's obviously an important part. And those kind of things change the calculus for the roster. It changes for certain players. You talked about the center position. I said yesterday that I thought Luke Wattenberg was starting to cement that role at the moment. Now, there's plenty of time to lose it, but I think he's clearly in the lead. Sam Mustipher's a veteran who hasn't really gotten a lot of looks here, probably because they know what he looks like. Alex Forsythe, earlier in the week, Sean Payton said that they were going to give him some reps at guard, which is not usually what you do if you're in the mix for starting center. But now all of a sudden, with Bailey out as kind of being the 6th guy in the jumbo package and the backup tackle for both sides, as he basically was last year, now all of a sudden, if you're Forsythe, if you're Mustipher, now going from, say, center to tackle is a big jump. But maybe when you're talking about jumbo package blocking, it's an opportunity to diversify your skill set and perhaps make a football team. And even at that point, the expectation would be if, say, they're lining up Alex Forsythe to give that a shot where Quinn Bailey was, that's the expectation for Forsythe would not be, wow, we expect him to be perfect. Right. He's doing something new and new entirely.
Well, and that's where the adjustment period comes in. And that's obviously where the injuries become extra brutal for the Broncos, you know, especially at a position of, I don't know if it's a position of need because they've done a decent job of addressing that through contract extensions and whatnot. But we all know that, you know, at times you're only going to go as far as your offensive line will go. Right. And so the fact that you are already having to, oh, excuse me, choking there on my coffee. You know, the fact that you are having to do some shape shifting already, I think, you know, the jury's still out on what this offensive line could be. But that's also why you signed Quinn Miners to an extension. Sure. That's why you have Ben Powers. That's why you try to solidify 3 or 4 guys on that offensive line. Obviously, the goal is to have these guys healthy and ready to go for 17 games plus 2 preseason games or 3 preseason games, whatever it is these days. But at the end of the day, you have to be flexible. And that's where I think that roster construction is going to be key. I do think the Broncos will be fine at offensive line when it's all said and done. I
do too. I don't think it's going to be a top tier offensive line. I think they're going to be in the league's top half. Maybe that's not good enough for the Broncos to get themselves into the playoffs, but I think there is some consistency there. Returning 4 of 5 starters, all very highly paid, in Garrett Bowles, in Ben Powers, in Quinn Miners, who's not highly paid yet, but will be in a couple years when his extension kicks in, and Mike McGlinchey. So the presumption there is not only do you have highly paid guys, you've invested in making sure your quarterback is protected no matter who that ends up being. But if that is Bo Nix, it's incredibly important because, look, no quarterback can help you when he's on his back. Very few quarterbacks can help you when they're running for their lives. But when you have a rookie and you need him to step in, the stability there, especially running the Sean Payton offense, knowing that you'll at least have the time to make 1 read, 2 reads, ditch it.
Right.
That's valuable to know that at least this team should be able to do that no matter who's at center. We had Ryan Harris join us earlier in the week, talked about the center competition, and said specifically, if there's one guy you have to replace, you want it to be the center because it's the easiest one. Obviously, interior pressure is a problem for every quarterback, and centers have to deal with that. But this whole idea, the highly paid offensive line, something that Alex Singleton referred to here just a couple of days ago, there's value to it because it is sort of the hidden part of the game, right? You focus on the quarterback, but Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, They can't help you if they're running for your life. If they did, we'd already be talking about a different trajectory for Patrick Mahomes because he'd have another Super Bowl. But look what happened when they lost it. Guess what the Chiefs did? Lineman, another lineman, and then go get another lineman.
Yep. You got to be able to set your quarterback up for success, and the best way to do that is building up in the trenches. As fun as the improvisation is, it's not a sustainable way to win these football games. And that's where, like I said, I know Sean Payton's not everybody's cup of tea.
And he is not into improvisational quarterback play.
Exactly. That's why it's like a Lego set for him. He knows exactly which pieces need to go where in order to make the whole thing come together. So we shall see. Exciting here, broadcasting from Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit.
Absolutely. Look at you getting that right. I mean, there's signs in front of our face. You can't really miss it. But obviously, if you enjoyed the program, you like what you're seeing out here, you can go ahead and subscribe. There's a red button right below where you're watching it. If you haven't yet, go ahead and like and subscribe and join it. You'll get notified when we come on air, what we'll be talking about before we even do. Want to remind you, of course, that all of our coverage here is brought to you by our great partners, specifically our friends at Rolling Smoke. And with warmer weather, like scalding hot weather, time to get outside and have some fun with family and friends. But you don't want to cook when it's 100 degrees outside. I mean, you may want to entertain, but that sounds terrible. I mean, who wants to do that? So you know what? Why don't you go ahead and find somebody who can do that for you and make it delicious? That's our friends at Rolling Smoke. When you need a break from the kitchen, give Rolling Smoke Barbecue a call, whether it's just feeding the family for dinner, you have a half dozen folks coming over, or maybe you got the whole family reunion and dozens on the way. You can pick up the best barbecue in town from one of Rolling Smoke's 4 locations. They're in Aurora, inside the Stanley Marketplace. Just follow your nose there. You'll find it. In Golden, inside the Golden Mill, at the corner of Dry Creek and University at Centennial, where you will find me more often than not. So say hi if you see me. And now the newest location open on 38th Avenue in Wheat Ridge. And if you're headed to show up at Red Rocks, skip the nachos, skip the hot dogs, get yourself some top tier barbecue. You will fall in love with it when you're there. Check out Rolling Smoke up at Red Rocks, and you will want to be at one of these 4 locations going and getting more for you and the whole crew. So check them out online, RollingSmokeBBQ.com. That's Rolling Smoke Barbecue. They're the ones that bring in all of this coverage to you. We really, truly appreciate all of it. Well, we have an opportunity to talk to one of our own, of course, like I said, team coverage here at Mile High Sports. Eric Goodman from Morning Drive. You may have heard him this morning. He joins us next. Welcome back to the show. We are live from Broncos Park out at Dove Valley. Team coverage from Mile High Sports still underway here. That's what it takes during training camp. And we're going to step aside from that for just a minute to talk to Eric Goodman of Morning Drive. You catch him every morning with his co-host, Bruce Hurdle. We had Bruce earlier on this week. Thanks for taking some time, Eric. And we're sitting here talking a little bit about the Broncos, but obviously with the remarkable Olympic performance by Katie Ledecky yesterday in Paris, dominating the 1500 yet again. And you're a guy with a lot of swimming background. Yep. We ended up talking about it a little bit, and we're like, wait a minute. Why don't we talk about that as opposed to one more, 10 minutes about Bo Nix or Jarrett Stidham? Because what we saw last night was not only one of the best individual performances in history. If you watched it on television, there was no one else on the screen when she ended up finishing in that last lap. But also, this is, again, in this particular
for 8 to 10 years. So a lot of people are discovering who Katie Ledecky is. I have known about her and her greatness for a long time. Michael Phelps is the most decorated Olympic swimmer of all time. But here's the difference. Katie Ledecky can do what Michael Phelps can do. Michael Phelps cannot do what she does. And it's kind of like horse racing. Mm-hmm. And what makes the Triple Crown so interesting is it's 3 different distances. Preakness is essentially a sprint. The Kentucky Derby is a mid type of race in swimming at 1.25 miles. Long distance is the Belmont at 1.5 miles. She can consistently win the Triple Crown every year. And that's what makes her so unique. Michael Phelps was a sprinter, and he owned that on so many different levels. But Katie Ledecky is such a unique type of swimmer. She has golds in the Olympics in the 200
and the 400,
right,
and the 800.
Well, the 400 is more of a mid-distance race. 800 is mid-distance long, and then the 15 is clearly long.
Right.
But winning a 200, here I'll ask you, looking at the Olympics, Carl Lewis, our age, right, was considered the best sprinter in the 100.
Right.
But you would look at Michael Johnson running the 200 as a sprinter as well.
But Lewis also long jumped at the same time.
No, I'm referring to strictly running.
Right, but just running. But yeah, but the idea of doing multiple different things within the sport is interesting too. And that's where the greatest kind of label comes up, right?
But what I mean in terms of track and field.
Right.
The 200 that Michael Johnson consistently won
Right.
at a record pace, he was considered a sprinter at the 200.
Right.
So the 50, the 100, and the 200, in theory, are considered sprints. So she has won at that level.
Yes.
And then she has won at every other level. Who in the history of swimming has ever come close to dominating all three? She's not a 100 swimmer.
Right.
She doesn't swim 50.
But a 200 is still a sprint.
The 200 is still a sprint,
Sure.
and she wins at all three levels. It's nearly, and think about the type of training that takes as well. Phelps, I know this for being a swim dad, training to be a sprinter and training to be in long distance are two totally different types of training. She has mastered all of them.
It really is remarkable to look at that career and realize, you know, she's got plenty of time left at this point too. And the dominance is ridiculous. That 1500, and you're right, she's won 200, 400, 800, 1500. These are all totally different training regimens.
She would have won more in the 15 had that been an Olympic sport.
It would be the quote of Usain Bolt doing what he did in the 100.
Correct.
And then also doing it in like the 800. And then having the same kind of dominance. And
correct.
And Usain Bolt never bothered even training for that because that's never what he did.
That's right.
And the folks at NBC last night after the win actually put a number together. It was really remarkable. They actually took Usain Bolt's numbers and they put on a percentage basis how much faster he was than his opponents on average during all of his Olympic performances.
Right.
And you know, it ends up being about 2% faster than everybody else. At the Olympic level, that's actually pretty big of a difference. Ledecky's was almost 3 times Usain Bolt's on average. So when you think about it, put away the times, put away the distances, you're talking about someone who is 5% or more faster than everybody else. And these are the best swimmers on the planet. And that's over the course of her career.
The most lopsided race, you can make the case, the most lopsided race in sports history was in 1973 when Secretariat won the Belmont.
Right.
And Ledecky is better than that in terms of she leaves the screen or no one else is in the screen.
That's it.
And that's what is so stunning. So again, 8-10 years ago, I started following her with great awe and respect. It is nice that finally she is getting her due. And I'll tell you why she's getting her due. Because Michael Phelps isn't in it.
Right. And that's a lot to do with it, fair or unfair, because they've overlapped over the course of their career.
Yes.
And Phelps has 14 individual golds. We went and counted that out. But when you take a look at Phelps's career, obviously, like you said, a sprinter and an elite sprinter and the best men's swimmer that there's ever been and the best men's sprinter there's ever been. And maybe you could argue the best sprinter swimmer, male or female, there's ever been. But when you start looking at Ledecky and realize she's not even close to done at 27,
right?
That's really quite stunning. And you go over the top 20 times in history in that race. Ledecky has all top 20, which is insane. I mean, the 20 fastest runs in history are all Katie Ledecky. Last night would have been the 8th fastest in history. Of course, it just goes on the pile. But what it does mean, if all of a sudden, 20 years from now, I was watching the reaction of Anastasia Kirpichanova of France, who finished second. And she was exuberant to finish in silver.
Well, that's what she was swimming for.
Right.
And she knew it before she jumped
and
in
she
the pool.
should be. And for normal mortal humans, that's a gold medal.
That's right.
And it's really shows that there really is, everyone's just playing for second place. And that's, I think, when you see the Olympics, there's the greatness of all these wonderful finishes. I'm not a triathlon guy. I would drop dead before I could finish any of the 3 disciplines in a triathlon.
Right.
But watching the end of that last night, where these guys, the British fella Yeet overtook at the very end, the runner from New Zealand, all these guys cross the line and basically just collapse in a heap. There's the pile of bodies at the end because it can generate that excitement, that kind of unpredictability. And that's one of the things that makes it so interesting. Then there's just the dominance that's on display when you see a Simone Biles, when you see Katie Ledecky, that is just stunning to witness. And when you realize in this Olympics, I was saying it when I was watching part of the gymnastics with a friend of mine. It is really special to be able to watch, say, a Simone Biles and realize in real time you are watching Secretariat, Babe Ruth. You're watching the best that's ever done it, the best that will probably ever do it, and you're watching them in real time. And sometimes in sports, it's really valuable to step back and understand what you're seeing so you can appreciate it. And Biles and Ledecky are in that group. They're the best it's ever been, and they'll probably be the best there's ever be, at least as long as I'm alive. And that's stunning.
There are certain records that will never be broken. Now, what I'm about to put out there, you're going to say, well, that'll never be broken. And you're right, it probably will not be. But there is the possibility of it. So, Cal Ripken's streak,
Of course.
that will never be broken.
Because people don't even want their players to play 162 anymore.
But it's possible, is my point.
Sure.
It is possible. No one will ever break Cy Young's record of wins at
511 wins, yeah.
It's impossible because pitchers aren't used that way.
Right.
With that, no one will break, I don't believe it's possible, no one will ever break Wayne Gretzky's record of assists for total points.
Right.
Right? I don't know if anyone will ever come close to matching Ledecky's times in the 1500. I don't know if anyone will ever come close to it.
And that's kind of amazing because in swimming, these records are often made to be broken. And really, in all the Olympic sports, they're made to be broken. But when you have the top 20 at certain points, you're so far beyond everybody else.
I mean, can you really think of the Olympics and find someone who has dominated their sport by such a wide margin? Simone Biles is the greatest gymnast of all time, but she's not winning by 15, 20 points in the individual.
No.
That's what Ledecky is doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty shocking just to see. And she has another opportunity, by the way, to pass or take the all-time lead in golds for a women Olympian of any variety. Larisa Latnina of the Russian gymnast has 9 individual golds. That's another one of those sports in which you can get a lot of individual golds because there are a lot of individual events. Right. Swimming, track and field, gymnastics in the summer, those are kind of the only ones that you can rack up those crazy numbers because there are that many opportunities to win those medals. But in Ledecky's case, she's not done with her Olympic career no matter what. She
might not. Well, remember, the Olympics are based every 4 years.
Right. And the next one's in Los Angeles.
Yes. And I'm sure she will want to compete. But what makes Olympic athletes so different and unique is they have to wait 4 years to get their crack at it.
Right.
You know, for Nikola Jokic, next year I'll try it.
Mm-hmm.
Next year I'll try and do it. For Patrick Mahomes, this year he gets another crack at another Super Bowl. If you want an Olympic gold, you have to train for 4 years until you finally get your crack at it.
And even in Ledecky's
long waiting game.
Ledecky's 1500s, it's a 15-minute race, but you don't have to train. You thought about it with Bolt. We talked about him. You have to train for 4 years to run for 9.8 seconds. But in Ledecky's case, it seems like a long swim at 15 minutes. Not when you have to wait 4 years for that.
Right.
I mean, that's not a lot of a time in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
We are out at Broncos Park at Dove Valley looking for the Broncos training camp situation here. And before we let you go, Eric, I do want to get your thoughts about one particular thing. I have yet to once call this a quarterback competition because it's not. This is about when Bo Nix takes over as the starter. So I would ask you this instead. What would be the potential drawback to just starting Bo Nix? I think back, I've talked about this a couple times this week, the idea of maybe Mike Shanahan handed the reins to Jay Cutler too soon after drafting him.
I was there.
So is there a risk of that happening again here, or is this situation with the Broncos and Nix entirely different?
It's different in this sense. If you start Nix, you can't pull him. See, at least with Stidham, If he struggles, you can pull him and you put
fan
in
base will be clamoring for it the second that Stidham throws a single pick.
Right. So is Peyton willing to be patient if there are major growing pains? I mean, the question is, you got to balance. Is it about winning or is it about development? Right.
The Broncos over under in Vegas is 5.5. And if you think that they're really going to be that kind of team,
Sean Payton doesn't care about Vegas,
but he doesn't think they're going to win 11 games this year. Even Sean Payton doesn't.
I don't believe that he does, but he owes it to the players in that locker room to put this team in the best position to win. Because what did these guys work in the offseason for?
Right.
Why are they out here now?
There's 53 guys on this roster, and their careers all matter with wins and losses too.
They really don't care that much about Bo Nix's development.
No.
They want to win games. They want to get their numbers. They want to get their contracts, and they want to win games. Bo Nix's development is not even on their radar. If you're going to put in Nix, you need to have the buy-in. Listen, you don't need to have the buy-in from the locker room because, quite frankly, their opinion, you can make the case, doesn't matter compared to who's making the decision.
Right.
The problem for Mike Shanahan was he never had the buy-in from the locker room on Jay Cutler. Not because Jake was a better quarterback. Jay wasn't very well liked. That was a problem. Jake was very well liked. Fortunately for Bo Nix, he seems like the type of guy where you can shoot him in the leg and he would say, no problem, I have another one. He's that well liked. And Stidham might win a popularity contest in that locker room as well. I'll ask you, I'll be curious to see today what happens on who is playing with the ones. And what do I mean by that? How many times has Sean said to us, we'll keep you posted, we'll keep you posted. And then I asked him at the press conference, I said, well, you keep saying you're going to keep us posted, but tomorrow we're going to see it on the field and you're not going to keep us posted. To which he responded, and I'm paraphrasing here, well, when you see, that's keeping you posted.
Right.
So we know that Stidham took over with the number ones for a practice in pads. Today is the day where if you're going to keep that rotation intact, it is Zach Wilson's turn. Is this going to be like an episode of Survivor where Wilson gets kicked off the island? Will it be Stidham or will it be Zach Wilson? What do you think? And I know we need to wrap this up.
Well, I think it's not going to be Zach Wilson. Let's put it that way. Okay. I think Zach Wilson was brought in to be the number 3 quarterback. I think taking advantage of the new rules where you can elevate guys without having to expose them to waivers. I think that's the idea for Wilson.
You're going to really keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster?
Well, you don't really have to. Remember, you can have one and then you can elevate the third quarterback for game day every time, and it's not like it used to be.
But that's not a roster spot.
So I think that's the plan. It ends up not being part of your 53. You elevate. Okay. And if nobody else wants Zach Wilson and wants to take him off your squad, which people probably won't at this point, then you get to try a free look at him. And I think that was always the idea for Zach Wilson. I don't think Wilson was ever in the mix to start. And I think we'll probably see that solidified very quickly. So it'll be interesting to discuss. And of course, every single morning, on the weekdays, you can catch Eric Goodman and Bruce Hurdle as they break it down for you and get you ready for every day of Broncos training camp. And then they will hand the baton to us. We'll take it from here. But delightful to have you out here, obviously, because, he's not done when the show's done. He's coming out here and doing all the other stuff. So
no, I'm going home.
Terrific opportunity.
So I'll make a sandwich.
To get to talk to Eric Goodman.
No, I'll follow you on Twitter and see what happened today.
Yeah, absolutely. But terrific to talk to you. Thanks so much. It's great to be out here with you and have a chance to break it down. So thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Eric Goodman, everybody. We'll be back with more from Broncos Park at Dove Valley with Mile High Sports. Welcome back. It is Sandy and Sean. Please, Sean Grotas here. Sandy's off. Aniello Piro's in. Team coverage today from Mile High Sports is what we do here. Obviously, it's one of the reasons that it's a spot to be. Live, local, independent for 25 years. That's why you come here. We are live at the end zone in the back corner over at Broncos Park here at Dove Valley as the Broncos practice continues. Obviously, the quarterback talk dominates, and then the best way to win in the NFL is to have a good quarterback. But the next best way to win, get after the other quarterback.
Yes.
And that's where the Broncos feel that they have really done something along their defensive line. When they added John Franklin Myers, now you look at a starting group, at least in the 3-4 alignment, if not, and also the nickel alignment, which is really the Broncos base, every team's base, where John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, and Zach Allen are going to be in that role as a starter. Malcolm Roach is going to be obviously kind of an important part of that rotation as well. With those two additions specifically, Franklin Myers and Roach, the Broncos feel that they have, if not solved, I don't think you can say you've ever solved anything in the NFL, but they feel really good about their front line in a way that they have not felt in a while, and in the early part of camp at least. And again, you don't want to overrate anything in particular on one individual practice, but when you start seeing practice after practice after practice, and virtually after every practice, everyone's walking away saying the same thing. D-line looks pretty good.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's what you want to see here from the defensive line. We spent, what was it, a couple segments ago talking about the offensive line.
A very highly paid one. One
exactly.
with 4 veteran guys coming back.
It starts in the trenches, man. And Franklin Myers has been one guy, to your point, that not even just because you brought it up, but talking with Cody, talking with other media members, he is jumping out there. Big body guy coming from the New York Jets. And that's the key, is it feels like the Broncos defense, specifically in the pass rush, has been lacking some identity for quite some time, right? It's been a couple of seasons now without Bradley Chubb, who was kind of your mainstay after Von Miller ends up departing. So maybe John Franklin Myers can be, one of the guys that steps up here for the Broncos in the trenches to help kind of set the tone defensively, because if they're going to be able to rush the quarterback, I mean, that's the key, man. What was the one thing that Tom Brady would struggle with? What's the one thing that every quarterback struggles with?
Interior pressure.
Exactly, in their face. And if the Broncos are going to be able to generate some of that interior pressure on a pretty regular basis, it's only going to help set them up for success.
Let me give you what Franklin Myers said a couple of days ago after practice. And you talked about tone. Well, he mentioned it too, and talked about the idea that it was asked specifically that when the pads go on, that it's an opportunity for them to really show up. This was his response, quote, "I think every single day is our time to shine. Why take a day off? It's our mindset to go out there every single day and set the tone. That's what it is. We're going to set the tone every day. And when it's game time, we're expected to set the tone." He talked a little bit more about in pads and said, "Me personally, I enjoy every chance I get to come out here, pads and no pads, because you just see it. Each and every day, something could happen. Pads or no pads, I'm trying to get better. And I'm in a new scheme. I'm going through some of the learning process of that. But you put the pads on and it's time to go. Win, lose, or draw. I'm ready for a war." Those kind of comments and that kind of energy is something that I think you hit on, that the Broncos have lacked a little bit. They had a great leader in Justin Simmons, but he was more of a sort of a technical guy. Pat Surtain is a technical guy. You don't really have a lot of rah-rah guys on this defense. Kareem Jackson is gone. And you don't necessarily need one. There are many different ways to lead. Right. But if you're John Franklin Myers and you're coming into this team and you're an established veteran that has a good reputation, the Broncos, quite frankly, would not have ended up with him, except the Jets had basically some salary cap challenges, and the Broncos were able to scoop in and take advantage of that and land him. I think it's great to see a guy come in here in a team that's been a loser for years and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm here. I'm not used to losing. I don't like it." He's a little used to losing on the Jets, but certainly doesn't like it. And go ahead and say, "This is what we're going to do here." And I think that addition, and Malcolm Roach, who's very well regarded around the league as a guy in the clubhouse, a guy with a lot of energy. I think having that on the line is really valuable, because I still think that the NFL game starts at the line of scrimmage. Offensive and defensive line, big guys pushing each other around, and the ones that do the best jobs tend to win the play. Win it enough times, you win the football game.
Yep, and I like the comparison you make about like the rah-rah guys to the technical guys, right? And personally,
and you need both, I think.
Well, and that's the thing, but I think the Broncos have them in the right places. Personally, I prefer to see the technicality and the finesse in the secondary, right? Shut up and do your job. The best compliment you can get is when the opposing team doesn't throw to your side. And I think Patrick Surtain does a fantastic job of kind of staying within himself and letting his actions speak more than his words. Where I want that nastiness, where I want that energy and that feistiness is in the trenches. And I think that's what you're getting with a guy like Jonathan Franklin Myers, is you want someone that is going to like that was the thing with Vaughn. Like Vaughn would have fun with it, right? But like you knew that when he lined up, or I've been seeing a bunch of like Ray Lewis highlights, and I know that Ray Lewis was a middle linebacker, but he would talk about how he would stand there waiting for the play to come, and he would just stare into the soul of the opposing team's running back and make it known that if you're going to run this football, you will be punished. And I think that type of energy, I know the NFL has changed a lot, but you want to inject a little bit of that second guessing. You want the doubt in the back of your mind of the opposing team's offense when you have those big bodies up front that are going to be able to plug those holes, knock out some running backs, and just make life difficult for the quarterback in regards to settling into his pass progression. So I think in regards to how the Broncos are constructing their defense, I think they're going about it the right way.
Zach Allen said earlier in the camp that when asked about Franklin Myers, he basically said that they see the game the same way.
Right.
Franklin Myers was asked about that, and he agreed. I think when you see Zach play, you see a guy come in with power, he can win with speed, and he can win with any type of move he throws out there. Having someone across from you on the opposite side who sees the same thing, you're able to work through those protections and work through those games when it's time. The hardest thing is people don't see that through the conversations, through the little bit of practice we've had, and just getting a chance to work through some of that stuff and bounce ideas off of each other. It's only going to make us that much better. And he went on to say that Allen has, quote, an interesting point of view when it comes to the game, and hearing how he looks at things in his get-off is something over the last week or so I've been asking, what are you looking at? What are you seeing? What are you keying? Something that's completely different to me when I was playing a lot more space. I was playing defensive end, and now I'm playing a little bit of inside and a little bit of outside. The coaching points are different, but it starts with his get-off, an understanding of what he does to get off the ball like that. But that puts him in position to make plays. It's really good when you see, especially this short a span of time, that you have those three guys in Franklin Myers and Jones and Allen, who not only all understand their role, but immediately gelled because they see themselves similar and they see themselves as just enough different that they can learn from each other and immediately use it because they do, as Franklin Myers said, see the game the same way, but they see it at slightly different perspectives. That bodes really, really well because the Broncos edge rushers, or what we used to call outside linebackers, they are definitely loading up on it. They feel good about Baron Browning. They feel good about Jonathan Cooper. They feel good about Nick Bonito. We'll find out what that rotation looks like. Jonah Ellis was drafted in the 3rd round. But the truth of the matter is, if you can generate pressure without bringing 2 blitzers, if you can bring 4 people and don't have to bring 5, that gives you the opportunity to have an awful lot of deception. If you can bring Browning or Bonito or Cooper with the 3 guys on the line and still get pressure consistently, it makes things easier for the cornerbacks, and it also makes things far more difficult for the quarterback. The Broncos haven't been able to do that until since the 1 year in which Von Miller and Bradley Chubb were both healthy at the same time, and that was a while ago.
Yeah, and I think you use the word deception. I also think it just provides you with that flexibility, right? Because we know that each team's offense across the NFL is going to be, this or that. I mean, I think about the game plan when you're playing the Chiefs versus you're playing, I don't know, the Tennessee Titans of old with Derrick Henry, right? Two completely different.
When you're okay bringing 2 different guys on a running play if you know you're tackling Derrick Henry.
Exactly.
If you're playing the Chiefs, maybe you want to show blitz on one and drop him back because you're going to have to deal with Travis Kelce. You don't want to necessarily leave that middle of the field open by bringing 2 guys after the quarterback.
Well, and that's the thing too with the running back position being a little devalued in recent seasons, right? Like it's still a very important position, but in regards to, you don't have many of those bell cow workhorse guys where it's like, Derrick Henry's getting the ball this many times a game, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit
by
more
committee
mixed.
is the standard now.
Exactly.
It really is.
And so that you're going to need to drop back players into coverage. That these receivers are going to get a lot of these calls, right? And so I think from that perspective, that flexibility and the ability to be deceptive is only going to bode well for this Broncos team, especially, look, here's the thing. We don't know what this offense is going to be like for Denver. So you're going to have to rely on your defense a little bit to keep you in these games, whether it's Jarrett Stidham or Bo Nix, while they try to figure out what Sean Payton wants to do on offense. And I think if we're using last year as a kind of a rule of thumb, I thought the Broncos defense did do a good job. Like, I'm not expecting any regret, except for that game against Miami.
Okay, I was like,
except for that.
I get that we've wanted to forget about it.
Along.
They did. They improved as the season went along, and a lot of that, I think, we have to keep that in mind. After Justin Simmons returned, after the Miami game, they looked like a completely different defense. That's because Simmons was kind of a quarterback as a safety, calling the plays, getting everyone in the right spot, and his leadership and the understanding of where everyone was supposed to be and finding a way to make sure guys are in the right spot. But he is gone. Brandon Jones, who's out right now for a week or 2 with a hamstring, the Broncos are not going to rush him back because he is absolutely the starter, so there's no hurry to bring him back.
Right.
But replacing Simmons, I think, is going to be a little harder than people think. But if you have guys like Franklin Myers coming in, he's not going to put guys in the right position because they're playing behind him. He's not worried about that.
Well,
leadership takes different forms.
Absolutely. And at the least, with the Broncos defensive line, Rearing and Deeren out there, it's going to take the pressure off of that secondary a little bit.
Right. Well, you need it to.
Exactly. And you know what? I got to say this. We talked about it with Cody earlier this week. Look, if Justin Simmons still isn't on a roster by the time we get close to week 1, I think the Broncos have to give them a call.
They should give him a call, but I don't think he's going to answer the phone.
I don't know if he would either. But here's the thing: Brandon Jones is an injury-prone player.
Yeah, it's been not last year, but over the course of his career, there's a concern.
You know, and it's like you're banking on PJ Locke, who we all like, but he's
also
more
been
of a complimentary player.
And had injuries.
Caden
We know about Caden
Stearns.
Stearns injuries.
I mean,
those are your 3 top safeties in camp, and Delaire Turniel is on PUP. Your top 4, in theory, all have injury concerns, and you released an Iron Man that only at the beginning of last season. Well, those were the first games that Justin Simmons had missed. A couple of different years, he didn't miss a snap.
Yeah.
So replacing Simmons is going to be a lot harder than people think, obviously. But if the defensive line can create pressure, that's going to ease everything else. And so for the Broncos, they haven't been able to do that in a while. Something to watch over when you're out at these training camps. Watch that scene with Franklin Myers, with DJ Jones, with Zach Allen, and with Malcolm Roach, who Franklin Myers said brings the energy every single time. You have that kind of guy when he rotates in and he's ready to go. That's a value. We'll see what that does for the Broncos. But right now, as it stands today, I think that's been the best unit on the entire team. And that's a good sign because it's one of the key ones, absolutely, to get that pressure because you're right. It sets up all 3 levels of defense. Obviously, you're thinking of football season coming around. You know, the sports betting world is complicated and moving all the time. But you know what, Aniello? You know the way we can handle it over at Mile High Sports. We've made it easy for everybody.
Absolutely. I like to play the numbers, and I know a lot of you out there do as well. And for over 4 years now, you've heard the ads, you've seen the ads, you've been overwhelmed by the ads. Heck, you probably can even recite some of them in your sleep, because I know I can. What is it, 1-800-429? I forget the exact hotline.
I think the Breaking Bad guy's mad at me. He seems angry all the time.
It's ingrained in my head all the time. But I'm so sorry for adding one more sports betting read to your life. But did you know this should be the only read that matters to you? If you go to milehighsports.com, we have gathered all of the best sign-up bonuses and offers and put them on one page on our website. No more random TV ad there. No more BS targeted ad on Instagram. All you got to do is go to milehighsports.com, the Colorado sports betting page, and you're going to have every single up-to-date sports betting offer right there in front of you, as well as some news and notes. We wanted to make it easy for you folks interested in sports wagering to find the best options, so we researched it all and brought them all together in a way that makes it simple to know what's available. Bonus bets, second chance bets, deposit matches, everything in one place. So visit milehighsports.com today or download on our mobile app, then click on Colorado Sports Betting. It is that simple. Think of it as your bonus from your friends at MHS. And the Buffs are about to start. The Broncos are about to start. Jokic might try to win another MVP. We got the McKinnon tee on. He might go for another Hart Trophy. Get your action down using the Colorado Sports Betting page online at milehighsports.com.
Over on the release coming up of Madden 25, of course, made a lot of noise over with EA Sports with the college game finally released after 14 years without it. But the idea now is more and more players look at this and look at their rankings and start to realize as the games become more realistic all the time, these rankings kind of matter enough that even the NFL thinks about it. And for the upcoming Madden, the new cornerback rankings are out today. And Pat Surtain comes in. PS2 comes in at number 3, behind only Jalen Ramsey and Sauce Gardner. Obviously, these players rated on a 1 to 99 scale. I say 1 to 99. It's really like 60 to 99. If anyone was a 1, I mean, forget it. But Jalen Ramsey comes up at a 97. Sauce Gardner, 96. Pat Surtain, 95. Follow him, Jair Alexander, 93. Charvarius Ward at 91. That's your top 5. I don't have any problem with that. That sounds about right. And it shows.
Oh, I do.
You do?
Hell yeah, I got a problem.
Really?
How is Sauce Gardner is a great player. Is a phenomenal player.
Are you going to tell me that Surtain should be ahead of Sauce Gardner?
I'm going to tell you that.
I look forward to hearing this because I'm going to tell you then why he shouldn't. But go ahead.
Here's the thing, man. Sauce Gardner, and I'm not trying to be, Mr. Twitter tangent guy that I see all these arguments on Twitter. This reeks of East Coast bias. This absolutely
East Coast bias is
reeks.
Real. It is real.
It reeks. I mean, here's the thing.
I think as an ESPN guy for
we
years.
were using the T-word technicality. I think fundamentally, all things considered, I think Patrick Surtain is the best cornerback in the NFL. I think he does everything at an extremely high level, and he does it cleanly. I have seen Sauce Gardner tug on jerseys left and right. I've seen Sauce Gardner play bump and run coverage and not get called for pass interference when he should get called for pass interference. I love me some Jalen Ramsey as well, so maybe that's where it's a little bit more different to me. Here's what I will say. For Sauce Gardner to be 2 percentage points higher than Patrick Surtain, I don't think that's valid. Sauce Gardner comes in at a 97. Patrick Surtain comes in at a 96. I think if anything, one skill point should be the difference in the separation between those two guys. I think Sauce Gardner has been set up for success with the Jets and Robert Saleh playing a little bit more aggressively on defense. And again, everybody loves the New York sports fan, and the New York sports media can't get enough of this guy. And here's what I'll say. If you put Sauce Gardner on the Broncos and Patrick Surtain on the Jets, I think you'd see Patrick Surtain at the top of the list.
You could make that argument. I think that is fair, but I'll tell you why I think it is reversed, because the way that the NFL defenses function now, and I agree, Surtain is a better technical cornerback. In fact, I think he's got the best technique in the entire league, and I think he's right there with Ramsey. I have no problem with Ramsey being number one. Ramsey, to my mind, is still the one guy
Ramsey's
you look
number
at.
two.
Pardon me. That's kind of
Gardner 1, Ramsey 2, Surtain 3.
okay. Well, that's funny. I'm looking over at
This is from the Madden page itself.
how about that? Okay, then a little bit off here. It's funny because they're Madden had a couple pages about it, but who knows? Either way, well, they're in the situation there with Ramsey, who I think is still the best of the bunch. But
Madden's already in mid-season form.
here's the difference, right? Yeah, here is the difference with Gardner, and why I think he's a slightly better corner, because defense today now looks at generating turnovers as the most important thing. The way the rules are structured, it's very hard to stop offenses in between the 20s. It's just built that way, right? And I think Gardner, because of the fact that he locks his guy down as well, more or less as well as Surtain. I get that the tug, everybody tugs. I'll agree Gardner gets away with it a little more than some, but Surtain tugs as well.
It's blatant with Sauce, though, but I digress.
It can be. I get that. But the difference is Gardner is more of a ball hawk and is more likely to get you an interception and a game-changing play. Surtain limits the offense, but the ball hawking has been predominantly Justin Simmons' domain. Simmons is no longer here. The question is, can Surtain start making picks and turn the ball the other way? For the Broncos defense to make a leap into the top 10, they've got to generate more turnovers than they have in recent years. And that has to come from interceptions. And I think that has to come from Surtain, because until and unless they have a guy opposite them that really, really is difficult to throw again. And maybe Levi Wallace will be that. He's a veteran that's well regarded around the league, not a superstar guy, but a good, solid corner. If he plays a regular, good, solid corner position, then maybe that helps keep people away from Surtain, and it's a little more forgiving. Teams did not stay away from throwing against Patrick Surtain last year. They didn't. They did still try to stay away throwing from Sauce Gardner. And that's because they're afraid of the game-changing play, the pick six, the kind of play that could happen there. And I don't think the league has that fear about Surtain. They're worried about throwing incompletions, but they're not worried about Surtain taking it the other way. And that's the difference. The higher end of what Gardner can do. Gardner can go out there and win you a game from the cornerback position. I haven't really seen that Pat Surtain will do that yet. We're talking about nitpicking between the top three corners in the league, but I do think that's the difference.
I think it's a fair point.
I want to see Surtain add that to his game.
I think it's a fair point. I personally, I almost think of like the Champ Bailey.
Don't get me wrong. He's the best player in the Denver Broncos.
Oh,
and it's
no,
not even
without
close.
a doubt. No, without a doubt.
But if you're looking for somewhere to go, little headroom, it's go get that ball.
No, I don't disagree with you. The age-old question for me is, if I was starting a franchise tomorrow, which one am I choosing? And I like the ability in Surtain to, and here's the other thing, and maybe this obviously isn't going to factor into the ratings. I just like the way that Pat goes about his business. I like that he's a professional. It seems like there's a little drama. There's always, a little diva-ness, I feel, with Sauce Gardner. I just think body of work, well-roundedness, I think Patrick Surtain is the more consistent player on NFL Sundays.
And I think when you look at the stylistic difference, and that's always fascinating with corners, right? Because that's been that way forever. Let's take Quinn Bailey and Deion Sanders, right? Obviously, both Hall of Famers, both tremendous corners. Sanders, obviously, mouthy, showy, in your face. Obviously he's been that way his whole playing career. Bailey was kind of, I just go do my job. When the game's over, I just kind of say I did my job. I locked a guy down. But Bailey did all that, and he was a ball hawk. He got picks to the point where at the a big chunk of his career, teams just decided I'm not even risking it over there. Until teams stopped risking it against Pat Surtain. And Bailey didn't always have an elite guy on the other side. I think that's the difference. But I think you can do it either way. And I get the point, because it depends on what kind of team you want and how you want to coach it. You don't have to do a lot of coaching of Pat Surtain. He's self-motivated. He's a self-starter. You know the technique's going to be good. Everything that you're looking at when you're clicking boxes on this, can this guy do this? Surtain checks every single one of those boxes. Everything he can do, everything. And I think including go get the ball. He did have 4 interceptions in his rookie season. So I think that's a possibility there. But if you were to say Champ Bailey was better than Deion Sanders or Deion Sanders was better than Champ Bailey, you can have that opinion, but it's hard to say either way because they played the game in a different style, but both were easily lock Hall of Famers. And I think when you look at Gardner and Surtain, it's stylistic, but maybe it depends on the kind of team you're coaching. For Sean Payton, I will give you this. I think Sean Payton would rather have a Pat Surtain all day long because he doesn't want a lot of drama on his football team.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And that's where it comes down to personal preference, right? This is like splitting hairs at the end of the day. Both Patrick Surtain, Jalen Ramsey,
every team in the league
Sauce
would
Gardner.
take any of those 3 guys.
Yeah.
Every team.
It's,
no
different strokes for different folks. You
Right.
know, what do you like in your cornerbacks? What do you keep an eye on? And personally, I think to your point, like Patrick Surtain reminds me of the kid, growing up that just knows how to do his homework on time, knows how to clean the dishes and goes to bed when he needs to, right? Versus Sauce Gardner, yeah, like maybe he's got some more upside or whatever it might be. And the jury's still out on these guys. What is this, year 4 for Patrick Surtain?
Yeah. I mean, it is.
Sauce
This will be
Gardner.
year 4.
So
it's 3 for Gardner.
That's the other thing is I think that there's still some progression and like the jury's still out in regards to, yeah, maybe this year, right now, is Sauce Gardner a better player on paper? Sure, you can make that argument. I think you've made a strong one, but I do think the body of work when it's all said and done, I just love the upside of a guy like Patrick Surtain, who I think has already solidified himself as one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. And I think to your point, have we seen maxed out Sauce Gardner? How much better can Sauce Gardner get at this point in his career versus I think a guy like Patrick Surtain has plenty of room to improve, despite the fact that he's already the 3rd or 2nd best cornerback in the NFL with what he's accomplished with that room to blossom.
And that's a good point because I do wonder in Gardner's case, because he was so explosive and dangerous and talky. And yes, he played on the Jets, and that's an unquestioned advantage when it comes to getting attention. You are right. When you talk about the reality of playing on the East Coast, you will get attention where other folks won't necessarily get attention. And Gardner's, talkative and flashy. And so, yeah, he's going to get the attention. But you're right. I actually do feel that if they reach their sort of maximum evolution, Surtain or Gardner, I think Surtain would be the better corner.
Yeah.
I do. But I want to see him get there. And I think he's going to have to, because if teams are going to throw his way, if they're not going to avoid him, you're going to have to take a couple away. The Broncos are going to need it. You talked about it with the defensive line not that long ago. This Denver Broncos offense, when you look at it, can you look at it and say they will score 24 points a game all year long? I don't think so.
Yeah, probably not.
I don't think so. And if that's the case, the defense is going to, 1, have to keep the opponents low in score. And 2, I think they're going to have to turn this ball over and give that offense some short fields. And in Surtain's case, I would put it this way. If he doesn't have a lot of picks because all year long they're staying away from him entirely, okay. I get that. And then we're going to have a very different conversation. But as long as teams aren't avoiding him, and last year when you look at the distribution of passes, they weren't avoiding him. They weren't afraid to throw at Pat Surtain. They weren't so afraid that they were going to shut off half the field and make their offense more predictable, because that's the goal, right?
Right.
When you had Champ Bailey, basically half the field, you knew the offense was not really going to test it.
Right.
And when you're defending that makes your life a lot easier, right? When you're only defending half the field, it's twice as easy.
Right.
But in Surtain's case, you're still seeing the pass distribution go there as often as the other side. And so that's showing that offenses aren't afraid to go that way and still want to use the whole width of the field. In Gardner's case, I think by the end of the year, we were seeing that a lot of teams were just deciding to avoid it like they do with Jalen Ramsey and have half the field. And it made the Jets defense maybe look a little better than it did. So for me, that's what Surtain needs to do. But finding someone opposite of him and then making sure there is depth. I think Jaquan McMillan obviously looked really, really good. He's the guy in the slot. We'll see if Chris Abrams-Drain, who has a lot of ability in the slot, can step up. I like the cornerback room.
Yes.
Surtain, Wallace, Moss, Abrams-Drain, McMillan. Damari Mathis is still here and still has room to grow. I like what they've got, but you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday as well. Until you say that they're going to be successful, you have to see them have success.
Yep.
Abrams-Drain's a rookie. Riley Moss had an injury and barely got into, not as many games as you'd like as a rookie last year. Mathis looked great as a rookie and then got exposed last year opposite of Surtain. If Wallace was looking like a Pro Bowler, he probably would have never left Pittsburgh. So there's less to prove there for Wallace, but there's still a little bit to prove. And so I think for the Broncos, there's a lot of that with this, right? We've talked about it with the wide receivers. There's a lot of talent on these units, but they need to turn promise into production, because promise eventually gets people fired. You have
Yes.
to produce. And Sean Payton is safe. Sean Payton's not going anywhere. Sean Payton makes $20 million and runs this team stem to stern. But he's made it pretty clear, you either produce or I'll find someone else who can. So for the Broncos, the talent acquisition is good. I want to start seeing that turn up. And I'll be honest with you, we've talked about not overrating a single practice, and I think that's still important.
Yep.
But I haven't seen that unit and go, wow, the DBs look great on this team yet.
Yeah,
It hasn't been a standout for the most part.
No, I agree. And I think, to kind of go full circle on the conversation that we had earlier too, like that's where you hope, like, look, is the Broncos secondary as good as it can be? No, but you hope that whatever, not imbalance, but the drop off, right, in the secondary, you hope that that's where the defensive line and the impact that they're going to be able to make is going to be able to alleviate that pressure.
Right. And that's one of the things when you get out here at camp and when you look at practices, these things don't happen in a vacuum, right?
Right.
You might have a cornerback lose a wide receiver, but how long did it take the pass rush to hurry the quarterback? Can't hit him, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's part of it too. And so when you evaluate these things, we talked about how it's too easy to look at the quarterback competition and say, oh, it must be this, it must be that, because it just doesn't work that way. Okay, so let's say Jarrett Stidham throws a great pass to Devon Vele, and everyone's talking about, wow, that shows Stidham's in the lead. Well, what happened in the whole play?
Exactly.
Was the offensive line phenomenal and they didn't get any pressure on him? And, whoever the poor corner was covering Vele had to cover him for 4 seconds, was not going to be able to do it. So, it's not as simple. This isn't a golf or bowling. It's not a sport where one person does things. Everything has to work together. And so that's got to be part of the evaluation process too. And when you're thinking about evaluating things and putting it together, you also want to think that way with your health. You want to think about what your goals are and how you want to get there. And there are a lot of different ways to get to the finish line you're looking for. Maybe you want to lose weight.
Yep.
Maybe you want to have a better sleep cycles and sleep more consistently. Maybe you just want to be sharper in the late afternoons. Well, that's what the folks at Constitute Health work with you. They're trying to help you optimize your health in the way that you want it to be optimized. And to really find out more about that thing, you have to dig deep. And that means that sometimes you have to get different opinions and understand what the science behind it is. So you start with blood work at Constitute Health. That's easy to find. There's over 2,000 locations in which they use, and there's usually one close to you. So you get your blood work done, you bring it in, and then the experts at Constitute Health will work with you on a 1-to-1 basis, making sure that you get patient-specific analysis based on your own blood work with transparency regarding your health, whatever concerns you have, and whatever goals you have. And then they provide options to handle that. Their therapies help burn fat. They can assist with weight loss. They optimize sleep, better your sleep cycles, enhance cognitive and executive functions, and then retain muscle mass, as well as many other personal benefits, whether you're looking for hormone replacement, semaglutide and GLP-1 therapies, peptides, NAD+. All of these things are available for you to optimize your health with our friends at Constitute in the way you want it to be, because not everybody's the same. All of us are different. All of us have different health goals, and at Constitute, they work very hard to make sure that you will be able to reach yours along with them. They're getting you there. And right now there's a special. If you mention Mile High Sports, mention MHS, and you'll get $50 off your initial blood work and consultation. If you go to the website, you can click the link for Constitute. You'll see it right there, and you can get the $50 off your initial visit and book right there. So check them out at ConstituteHealth.com at Constitute Health. They're optimizing your health, and that's because you want it that way. Check them out, ConstituteHealth.com. Well, we're going to turn our attention here. Yes, we are out at Broncos training camp, but when the best basketball player in the world does his thing out at the Olympics, it's worth mentioning Nikola Jokic for Serbia. As Serbia levels Puerto Rico in pool play, Nikola Jokic becomes the first player in the history of the Olympics to have 10 or more points, 15 or more rebounds, and 5 or more assists in the game. And Jokic did better than that because he missed his usual triple-double by only a single assist. Jokic doing Jokic things for Serbia, and even Olympic history not doing anything to stop him.
He's the best player in the world, man. And, I've talked about this with some of the guys at the studio. I've talked about it with my personal friends. I have found myself becoming less and less interested with the NBA as a whole, and just more and more interested with just Nikola Jokic. Just to be honest with you, like he's the one guy that really, because I can get.
And who was the last guy you thought about like that? Like Jordan, Kobe,
honestly.
Where were those guys?
Young Kevin Durant.
Yeah, they were more fascinating to you than the whole league.
Yeah,
it's taking that kind of guy.
Like young Kevin Durant, early Steph Curry. And look, I'll come out and say it. I'm still annoyed at Jamal Murray. I'm still annoyed at Michael Porter Jr. I'm still pissed off at Michael Malone for running his starters into the ground. I know this is an Olympic segment, but I can think.
Or you can ask Contavious Caldwell-Pope about that. A little bit of shade thrown on the way out.
Well, and that's the thing. I can sit back and think of Nikola Jokic, and I can still be happy. because at the end of the day, what this guy does on a game in and game out basis, whether it's for the Nuggets or whether it's on the Olympic stage, is nothing short of awe-inspiring. I mean, like, who does he have as his teammates for Serbia? He's got Nikola Jokic.
Filip Petrusev had 5 points and 9 boards. He was their second guy. But Jokic, get this, the 107-66 win. Obviously, Serbia cruised. Serbia had a 12-point lead early on before Jokic even scored. But in less than 5 minutes of the game action, he already had 6 boards and 4 assists. I mean, that is just...
He's a freak.
He's just toying. And I'm not talking about toying Puerto Rico. Nikola Jokic at this point is toying with the sport of basketball. It is his personal plaything. He walks out onto the court no matter who he's playing, and he just does whatever he wants to do.
Well, and the crazy part about it is, like, look at LeBron James. Like, LeBron James goes out there, whether it's on the Olympic stage or in the NBA, and you can see the fierceness, right? You can see the attention to detail.
LeBron James, give him credit. When you watch the Team USA play, and maybe LeBron James at really 40 is not the best player on the team, but he clearly sets the tone. He's clearly the hungriest, and he's clearly the guy that gets in that huddle and says, we're not bleeping losing this game.
And the crazy part
if you have a problem, give it to me.
Exactly. And Nikola Jokic walks into the game, looks like he just rolled out of bed.
Yeah.
And he just goes out and dominates like it's nobody's business.
And the first part of the game, he's like, well, I want to get some of the other guys hot, like Petrusev. So I'm not going to shoot for a while. I'll set you up. I'll clean up the garbage. I don't need to score.
Yeah, like, I don't know what it's like to be a dad necessarily, but it feels like, you know, his teammates are like the kids. And he's
I'm
just
a dad.
Here you go.
It's never felt that easy.
That's what I'm saying.
It's never felt that easy.
Okay, you do this, I do that, you know, and it's like away we go. Like,
just follow his lead.
It's just effortless from a guy in Nikola Jokic. And again, you know, it is the Olympic stage, and I just think it is phenomenal to see, you know, him in his off season from the NBA, just going out there effortlessly, continuing to dominate this sport, you know, regardless of who he has on his team.
I'm not even going to lie about it. I want a Serbia-U.S. final so bad.
I'd love it too. You know what else is interesting though, Sean? Jokic looks great. Jamal Murray.
The whole Olympics, look, I never doubt. And by the way, one thing about Jokic is interesting. You talk about the unselfishness of Nikola Jokic. He is not the captain of the Serbian team.
Right.
That is Bogdan Bogdanovic, who is the captain, and you know full well that Jokic could not care less. Totally unimportant to him.
I think he would be upset if he was the captain.
Yeah, I don't think he wants that. He's like, nah, never mind. I don't want to deal with that. Just let me do my thing and go for it. They take on South Sudan next, who they already blew out in the last World Cup, but we'll see how that goes for Serbia. But obviously, Jokic cruising. But yeah, you bring up Jamal Murray, and it's important. Jamal Murray, and I said this before the Olympics, I do not blame him. In fact, if I were Jamal Murray and I had the opportunity to play for my country in the Olympics, I'm taking it.
For sure.
So if I'm Murray, I'm absolutely playing in these Olympics. But to say there's not a risk there, if he plays poorly, this is a guy that's wanting a contract that is, Ryan Blackburn of Miley Sports has been on top of it since the get-go. The contract negotiations with Murray and the Nuggets are complicated. The Nuggets want to give him the standard deal, and that includes not a lot of options. You're going to get paid a big bunch of money, but you won't get a lot of protections with it. They'd like to remove some of the protections as well for injury and other situations. Murray doesn't want that. He basically wants he's like, I want the max with everything that's included. So he's bet on himself, and he did that last year, and the injuries, I think, caused a problem there. It wasn't easy for him to get through that season and wasn't going to get the super max. Now he goes out in the Olympics, and he has underwhelmed. And I've talked about it too. I think all of Canada watches Jamal Murray now the way Nuggets fans watch him, and that's a little bit through your fingers. Every time he lands, I cringe a little bit. I'm like, not this time. Don't get hurt. And I think for the Nuggets, as the longer this goes on and the more that Jamal Murray takes a risk, if he gets hurt significantly, whether it's at the Olympics, whether it's at practice, whether, I don't know, it's getting out of the shower, before he gets that new contract signed, he could lose himself $75-80 million. The risk that Jamal Murray is taking is monumental. It's his life, it's his money, but at a certain point, Jamal has looked in the last year since the championship as if he's not been the guy that everyone thought he was. Playoff Jamal did not arrive. Now, granted, the whole team was run into the ground, and that's partly Michael Malone's fault. But this idea that Jamal Murray can be a pretty good player, but not an all-star during the regular season, and then will immediately become Kobe Bryant in the postseason. look, that's been fun and that's been nice. But that indicates, if that was the case, that Jamal Murray has a switch that he intentionally flips.
Well,
and if that's the case, that's a problem.
Let's run with that thought, for example, because that's actually a fact in regards to what I've been told by people that cover the team and are in and around the organization. It is more often than not across the sport, right? You use training camp, you use the offseason as your ramp up to get to the regular season. Jamal Murray uses the regular season as his ramp up for the playoffs. You know, there has been well-documented conversation about Jamal Murray not taking his mental and physical side of the game as serious as he should, where he thinks he is Batman and he can give himself a week to get into the shape that he needs to. It almost feels like that about, when you're playing at your rec, right? It's like, hey man, I haven't hooped in this long, but I can still get out there in the rec and give me a couple warm shots and I can get right back to my
Some
form.
guys can do that. Danny Bailey, you can't see him over his shoulder. Danny Bailey can do that. He can just kind of roll out of bed and play some rec basketball and flip the switch. But eventually, every once in a while, you flip the switch and the light doesn't come on.
There is a maturity question with Jamal Murray. There is no question about that.
I think that is fair, because I know if I were advising Jamal Murray, and I love the confidence and I love the betting on yourself, but at a certain point, you're like, man, we're talking about $200 million. And the second you sign it, this is the NBA, you get it all.
Yep.
I have, given the last couple seasons of which injury has been a concern, I understand it's not exactly the contract you want, but you are a good player who is beloved in Denver. You've won a ring. You will probably be in the mix to win another one as long as number 15 is your teammate. Man, I am taking the money and I am running, even if it's not exactly what I want. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
No, I think that's well put. And here, I just don't understand Jamal Murray, where it's like what more could you possibly ask for? This organization stood by you and let you take your time as you recover from your injuries.
Well, with a notable exception when Tim Connolly kind of threw him under the bus at the previous outlet I was at and said that that Jamal was cleared and he could play whenever he wanted. Sandy and I piled on that, but for the most part, you're right.
Yeah, but
been patient.
Like in regards to, I don't know, man. I think Jamal Murray thinks he's better than he actually is. I don't think Jamal Murray recognizes.
The way he handles his contract indicates that you're right. He must think he's better than he is.
And it's like, and then here's the thing, and I'm not trying to take
he's a great player, but you've never been an all-star.
Jamal Murray is Jamal Murray because of Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray is a great individual player on his own. He is, but where he gets to playoff Jamal and has these highlights and these accolades is because of that dinky dunk pick and roll
two-man game.
Nobody can stop. Nobody can stop it.
And to be fair, Murray's a big part of that, but nobody can stop it primarily because of Jokic, not Murray.
Exactly. Jamal Murray thinks of himself as Batman. He is Robin.
Correct.
He is Robin.
Absolutely.
Could he be a great Robin? Absolutely. You will never be. The Nuggets.
And the Nuggets are offering Robin
Nikola
$200 million.
Exactly.
By the way.
And like that's the thing is
take the money, man.
We're at the point with the Nuggets, in my opinion, where you've climbed the mountaintop, you've won your championship, you overpaid for Michael Porter Jr.
You did.
Michael Porter Jr. is not a max contract.
But that ship has sailed. You're stuck with it.
Jamal Murray, you know what you got. But hey, if the maturity questions are going to be there, if you're not going to take it too serious, is that the guy you want? Is that the guy you want? They're going to sign him to the contract extension. But now that you have gotten over that mountain, it's time to, I think, start to ask yourself these questions of how do we maximize Nikola Jokic? Because I can tell you what, a sulking, annoyed Jamal Murray is not going to be the best option to maximize Nikola Jokic's prime years.
That's absolutely true. And it will be fascinating. Keep in mind, Russell Westbrook, now added to the Nuggets, is the only, keep this in mind, guys. He's the only player that Nikola Jokic has played with ever that has been an all-star.
Yep.
Ever. No other player Nikola Jokic has ever played with has been an all-star. What he has done in his career, bringing the Nuggets to the height that they had, is unprecedented, at least in the last 40-plus years of NBA basketball. He is a singular player, and that's where the Nuggets, at a certain point, it becomes tricky. The Nuggets don't want to play hardball with Jamal Murray. But right now, it feels like the momentum is trending to where Murray is almost forcing the Nuggets to play hardball. Here they are with a dump truck of money saying, hey, we want to protect ourselves a little bit, but here, take this insane amount of money that will set up your great-grandchildren for life. Just have it. Just take it. And Murray's continually pushing back, well, I want this and this and this and this and this. At a certain point,
he's perfect.
At a certain point, the Nuggets are going to be like, you've never even made an all-star team. You miss about a third of the season every year. What are you talking about?
That's exactly it. Jamal Murray thinks he's better than he actually is.
And he's a really, really good player, and he's a perfect fit for Jokic. But at the same time, you can't overrate yourself. To be completely honest here, if the Nuggets had, say, drafted Jaylen Brown somehow.
Yeah.
In that same draft. You think that we're not talking about Jaylen Brown like we're talking about Jamal Murray?
Yeah.
Probably that and more.
The facts are the facts. Is the potential for Jamal Murray to be a consecutive, or to be a consistent all-star there? Absolutely. Sure. That's all in play. But the reality of the situation is the notion of Jamal Murray is good player, great complimentary piece, injury questions, motivational questions, and not an all-star. These are the facts right now.
And here's where the question comes up that's uncomfortable, I think, for Nuggets fans, but it may be the reality. The Nuggets overpaid for Michael Porter Jr.
And they had to.
That was a Tim.
They're
I
a
agree.
poverty franchise.
They were kind of stuck, but they did overpay, and I think they knew they overpaid at the time. And you have to live with it. That was a Tim Connolly call. Calvin Booth overpaid Zeke Naji for no apparent reason.
That one was idiotic.
That was foolish, and I said so beforehand. It was foolish, but they're stuck with that. Here's the thing, though. I actually think the contract that they're offering Jamal Murray right now might actually be overpaying Jamal Murray too.
I don't disagree. And the funny part about that is that's actually going to be a discount, because if he was an all-star, he'd be paying him a hell of a lot more.
Probably so. The Nuggets are betting on Jamal Murray being the guy they've seen at his peak. Jamal Murray hasn't been the guy they've seen at his peak with regularity. And that's 20,
that's him 20% of the time.
That's the next step.
Version.
So for the Nuggets, obviously that's interesting to watch. We'll watch Jokic and Serbia, of course, Team USA in action as well. So far, so good for them. We're out of Broncos training camp. Practices wrapping up. We'll be back at it tomorrow, of course, for Friday, an actual football Friday, because there'll be football on the field right in front of us. How about that? We're talking about the Hall of Fame game in action tonight. Randy Gradishar, part of the Hall of Fame class this year. That's exciting. We'll make sure we talk about that with you as well. Thanks to Cody Roark, as always, for joining us. Eric Goodman, Morning Drive, joined us as well. AP stepping in, doing his thing. And none of it happens without, like I said, like a rec league basketball guru, like legend, Danny Bailey right there, making sure that every single bit of this works. We appreciate everything that every one of you, however you're consuming the show, whether it's on YouTube, radio, you name it, on demand. We love every single one of it. Thanks so much. Click and subscribe over on that YouTube channel to get all of the latest. But we will be back at it tomorrow. For the entire Mile High Sports crew, I'm Shawn Drotar, and you're at the right spot. We'll catch you next time right here at Mile High Sports.